Pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai is on trial in Hong Kong on charges of breaching national security and colluding with foreign forces. Lai has denied all the charges. The media tycoon, jailed since December 2020, faces life imprisonment if found guilty. The self-made millionaire was arrested under a security law that China is accused of using to crush dissent or dissidents. Lai's case has caused an international outcry and is widely seen as a test of Hong Kong's judicial independence. While critics call the China-introduced national security law as the end of Hong Kong, WION Fineprint tell you more about what exactly does the law entail and what has changed since it was introduced, beginning with what is this law about? Even though Hong Kong was meant to have a security law, it could never pass one because it was so unpopular. So China stepped in to ensure the city has a legal framework. The law now criminalizes any act of 1. Secession, 2. Subversion, 3. Terrorism, and lastly 4. Collusion with foreign and external forces. The national security law came into effect at 11 p.m. local time on June 30th in 2020. This was an hour before the 23rd anniversary of the city's handover to China from British rule. The passing of the law gave Beijing powers to shape life in Hong Kong it never had before. Its key provisions include crimes of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces to be punishable by a maximum sentence of life in prison. Damaging public transport facilities can be considered terrorism, and those found guilty will not be allowed to stand for public office. In addition to enforce the law, Hong Kong will have to establish its own National Security Commission with a Beijing-appointed advisor. And Hong Kong's chief executive will have the powers to appoint judges to hear national security cases. So even though Hong Kong has the power to appoint judges, Beijing, on the other hand, will still have the power over how the law should be interpreted. If the law conflicts with any Hong Kong law, the Beijing law takes priority. The provision also allows some trials to be heard behind closed doors. That is, trials to be heard behind closed doors, where people suspected of breaking the law can be wiretapped and put under surveillance. The national security law also applies to non-permanent residents and people from outside Hong Kong. Hundreds of protesters, activists, and former opposition lawmakers have been arrested since the law came into effect. Last year, United Kingdom announced that 2 of its Supreme Court judges would no longer sit on Hong Kong's top court, as a threat to civil liberties had made their role untenable. Numerous pro-democracy news outlets in Hong Kong have also shut down over the past few months, including Apple Daily, which was known to be critical of the mainland Chinese leadership. On the legal front, Jimmy Lai's trial begins 2 weeks after the end of another long-running national security trial against pro-democracy figures known as the Hong Kong 47. The verdict in that case is expected in March next year. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.